Check her bag.
Thief!
The words cracked across the parking lot like a slap. Yuna Jang felt hands close around her canvas tote before she understood what was happening. Cameras lifted. Someone's phone caught the exact second a sealed white envelope tumbled out of her bag onto the pavement. "Thief," Vanessa Kerrigan said, loud enough for every lens to catch it, her voice smooth as the marble lobby she'd walked out of moments earlier. "She's been circling the donation table all afternoon." Behind her, 2 guards still had the ragged man pinned to the ground, his knee bleeding into the concrete. Yuna had only tried to stop them from dragging him. Now it was her turn. "If you think you know how this story ends, stay with me, because the man on that pavement is about to change everything, and I promise you haven't seen where this goes. Comment the city and the exact time you're watching this from, then subscribe, because it's about to get worse before it gets better." Nobody moved to help her. Yuna knelt, gathered her scattered $20 bill with shaking hands, and did the only thing that still felt like hers to control. She placed the money in the ragged man's palm anyway. "Buy food," she said quietly. 6 hours earlier, none of this had existed yet. At 9:40 that morning, Yuna had stood in the break room of the Renwick Family Foods distribution warehouse, arms crossed, listening to her supervisor explain why her temp contract wouldn't be renewed. "Corporate's tightening headcount," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I flagged a shortage in the Ashwood shipment count." "That's why, isn't it?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." She'd cleaned out her locker in 11 minutes. No severance, no explanation beyond a form letter already printed and waiting. She'd walked out past the loading dock where pallets marked Renwick Roots, donated, do not resell sat stacked 3 high, and she hadn't thought much of it. Not yet. By afternoon, she'd have somewhere else to be, a community giveaway 2 miles from her own kitchen table, where a stranger in a torn coat would ask a security guard for food and get thrown to the ground for asking. She had no idea, kneeling on that pavement with her last $20 gone, that the man she'd just helped owned the entire building behind them. The anonymous report had arrived 9 days earlier through a public terminal, no return address, no name. Elias Renwick read it for the 4th time that morning, alone in his corner office 40 stories above downtown Atlanta. Photographs of relief pallets sitting inside a commercial storage bay. A manifest listing quantities that never matched what actually reached Ashwood. One line at the bottom, typed plain, "Sir, the people this program claims to feed are being used to sell it." He set the page down and looked at Andre Voss, standing near the window in his usual charcoal suit. "You've traced the sender?" "Not fully. Whoever copied these had warehouse access at some point. That's all we know." "And Vanessa?" "Gave me glossy summaries when I asked for raw distribution numbers. Told me warehouse clerks always leave when they find better opportunities when I asked why 3 of them quit inside 6 months." Elias tapped the folder. "Renwick Roots has a distribution event in Ashwood this afternoon. 2 entrances, one for donors and cameras, one for the people actually waiting on food." "I'm aware. I want to see the second one. Without a badge. Without a car. Without anyone knowing who's walking through it." Andre's jaw tightened, the way it always did right before he said something Elias didn't want to hear. "With respect, sir, that's not oversight. That's a man who's tired of reading reports and wants a story to tell himself instead. I built this company from a corner store, Andre. I know what it looks like when people are hungry. I want to know what it looks like now, from the ground, without a camera pointed at me telling me what to feel. You'll be recognized. Not if you do your job right." Andre exhaled slowly, the closest he ever came to conceding an argument he still disagreed with. "1 tracking device. 1 earpiece. Constant contact. And if there's real danger, I move, whether you like it or not." "Fine. I mean it, Elias." I said fine. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the man who signed off on 9-figure acquisitions without blinking was standing in front of a mirror while a makeup artist darkened the skin beneath his eyes and roughened 3 days of beard he didn't have that morning. The clothes were easy to change. What neither of them accounted for was how a man walks when he's spent 40 years being obeyed, and how hard that was going to be to hide from anyone paying close enough attention. The Ashwood distribution site had two faces, and Elias saw both within 10 minutes. Out front, a cream carpet stretched toward a gold backdrop reading Renwick Roots, Feeding Dignity. Photographers circled donors holding relief boxes they'd never actually carry home. Vanessa Kerrigan stood at the center of it in an emerald blazer, speaking into a lens about compassion and accountability, her voice smooth as poured syrup. Around back, behind a chain-link fence, a dozen people stood under a small canopy, hemmed in by metal barriers, waiting on boxes that hadn't arrived yet. Elias approached the rear line. A guard stepped into his path. Registration's closed. The sign says distribution runs until 6. You reading signs now? The guard looked him over, the stained coat, the borrowed limp. Go on. I haven't eaten since morning. That's not my problem. Elias's hands curled at his sides. In his ear, Andre's voice was low and even. Easy, sir. He tried the front entrance instead. The same guard cut him off before he'd gone 10 feet, loud enough now that two guests turned to look, phones lifting. You think because there's air conditioning in there, you can just walk in? That was when Una reached them. Her bus had stopped short of the lot, she'd walked the last half mile to save the fare, and she arrived in time to see the guard's hand land hard on the stranger's shoulder. Why are you pushing him? Ma'am, mind your business. He asked a question. Answer him. Vanessa had already stopped mid-sentence, drawn by the noise. Her smile thinned as she crossed toward them, gold earrings catching the camera lights. An application, she said, once Una explained why she'd come, a warehouse role, unpaid final wages. Her eyes moved over Una's worn shoes, her canvas bag. You came dressed like this for a finance position? A few guests laughed. Una felt heat climb into her face and said nothing. And now you're staging a scene with him, Vanessa went on, not looking at Elias at all, for the cameras. She turned toward a man in a navy suit near the entrance and lowered her voice for 2 seconds, too quiet for Una to hear, not quiet enough for Elias to miss entirely. He watched the man's eyes drop toward Una's open bag. Then he watched the envelope appear. By the time Una reached her apartment that night, she had 14 missed calls and a phone screen full of words she didn't recognize as her own life. Fake beggar and woman caught stealing donations at Ashwood charity event. The clip lasted 38 seconds. It showed the envelope. It showed her saying she'd never seen it. It didn't show the man in the navy suit reaching into her bag. It didn't show the guard's hand on the stranger's shoulder before any of it started. The comments were worse than the clip. Poor people always got an excuse. She should be arrested. Bet the beggar isn't on it too. Una sat on the edge of her bed in the dark until the building's shared meter ran out and the lights clicked off on their own. She didn't cry loudly. Loud crying invited questions from thin walls, and she didn't have answers to spare. At 6:15 the next morning, someone banged on her door. Her landlord, sweating through an undershirt, holding his own phone up like evidence. You bring this to my building? I didn't steal anything. I don't care what you did. People are talking. You got 7 days. He left before she could argue the lease terms. 2 neighbors watched from cracked doors and said nothing, which said everything. Una sat back down on the bed and pulled a worn brown envelope from beneath her mattress, the one she'd kept for 2 years, since her first temp contract with a different Renwick program had ended the same week she'd asked too many questions about a shipment count that didn't add up. 41 dispatch forms. Photographs. A list of delivery addresses that, when she'd checked them herself, simply didn't exist. She'd told herself she kept them because she was careful. That had never been the whole truth. She'd kept them because the missing numbers disturbed her sleep, because 11,000 units of food didn't vanish like smoke, because somebody, somewhere, had eaten the money instead of feeding anyone at all. A box of matches sat beside her hot plate. If she burned the envelope tonight, nobody could ever again say she'd taken anything that wasn't hers. The trouble would end where it started, with her, alone, believing what she'd seen because no one else needed to. Her hand hovered over the matchbox for a long time. Then she thought of the grandmother she'd once watched wait 6 hours on an overturned bucket for a relief box that never came, and she put the matches down. The table was an old door laid across 2 milk crates, set up on the same ashwood corner Una had used for 8 months. 3 loaves of bread. A pot of beans kept covered. A handwritten sign, take what you need. Leave what you can. No photos. Cooked when? She asked a man dropping off a tray of rice. This morning. Kept covered? On the stove, yeah. She wrote the time on a strip of tape and pressed it to the lid. Then we serve it till 2. After that, it goes in the bin. Throwing away food when people are hungry? Food poisoning doesn't care how hungry you are. Safety first, or don't bring it. Elias watched from across the street before crossing, the same gray coat, the same borrowed limp. When she saw him, her arms folded on instinct. You're back. I'm hungry. She studied him a beat too long. His hands were wrong, too clean beneath the dirt. He didn't flinch when a truck backfired nearby, the way people who actually slept near traffic learned to. He looked at people directly instead of scanning the ground for dropped change. What's your name? Eli, he said, and disliked how easily the lie came. Eli what? He hesitated half a second too long. Eli Banks. You keep records, he said, changing the subject, nodding at her clipboard. Of everything that comes in and goes out. Why? Because good intentions without a record can turn into theft real fast. The sentence landed harder than she meant it to. She pushed a plate toward him instead of explaining further. Eat. He ate slowly, watching her turn away 2 men trying to take more than their share, watching her reject a pan of rice that smelled sour despite the vendor's protest. You worked in a warehouse, he said finally. Her whole posture changed. How do you know that? You count everything before you hand it over. That's not a beggar's habit. That's not an answer to how you know. He had no good one ready. She stepped back from the table, done with him. I don't know what you're really asking me, she said, but I know it isn't about food anymore. She pulled a small card from beneath the table, a shelter that took men after screening. Go there before 7. Don't sleep outside if you don't have to. You're still helping me. I'm sending your questions away. Hunger's a separate matter. She turned back to the line forming behind him. Don't come back asking things you already know the answers to. The call came the next morning from a woman who introduced herself only as handling reputational matters for Renwick Family Foods. We can resolve this quietly, she said. A settlement. You'd sign a statement confirming the documents in your possession can't be verified. I didn't alter anything. Nobody's saying you did. The statement just says it can't be verified. Una hung up without agreeing to anything. An hour later, someone slid an envelope under her door, a photocopy of her ID, a draft statement, and a note in blue ink, signed today. This can get bigger. She photographed every page and called a legal aid number a coworker had once mentioned in passing. That was how she met Yolanda Price, steady-voiced, unimpressed by threats dressed up as paperwork. Did you sign anything? No. Good. We preserve, we don't panic. The warning came a day too late. At 7:16 the next morning, 2 police officers arrived at her building with a search authorization tied to a theft complaint. Una called Yolanda from the hallway, hands shaking, while officers moved through her single room, the mattress, the plastic bucket, the shelf above her hot plate. One officer lifted a folded scarf from the corner and went still. A watch. Diamond-studded, engraved beneath the clasp, VK. Una felt the floor tilt under her. I have never seen that in my life. Say nothing else, Yolanda murmured, arriving just in time to see it bagged as evidence. Not until we're in a formal interview. They put it there. I believe you. Now we have to prove it. Outside, a neighbor was already filming through a cracked door. Her landlord watched from the gate, arms crossed, saying nothing, which, by now, Yuna understood was its own kind of answer. She was released hours later without charge, her documents copied and returned, the watch kept as evidence regardless. Sunlight felt strange on her face after the buzzing fluorescent light of the interview room. That night, back in a room with a lock that no longer quite caught, a new message lit up her phone screen from a number she didn't recognize. You should have signed. The eviction notice became final. Yuna packed one bag, documents, ID, a single change of clothes, and left the rest behind in a room that already felt like it belonged to someone else. Yolanda arranged a bed at a women's support hostel 2 bus rides away. Job rejections followed her like weather. A supermarket manager recognized her from the video and said he'd call her back without taking her application. A warehouse in Riverdale had her pass an inventory test with a near-perfect score, then sent a rejection 40 minutes later. No reason given. She didn't need one. Rain came hard over Ashwood that evening. Yuna stood under an awning waiting it out, on her way back from helping Yolanda sort documents, when she spotted the man in the gray coat leaning against a bus stop post. At first she thought he was sheltering. Then his knees buckled. Eli, she ran to him. His lips moved without sound, sweat pouring despite the cold rain, hands trembling violently. Are you diabetic? He managed a nod. She had one glucose tablet from Yolanda's office, tucked in her bag out of habit. She pressed it into his hand. Chew. Slowly. She flagged down a passing driver, paid the fare with money meant for her own bus fare home, and rode with him to the nearest clinic, talking the whole way to keep him conscious. Stay awake. What's your full name? His eyes fluttered. Eli, a horn blared outside the window. Banks, he finished, weakly, even now still committed to the lie. At the clinic, nurses stabilized him within the hour. When they asked for a contact, he gave them a number. A man in a plain gray shirt arrived 17 minutes later, no suit this time, all urgency. You're his friend? Yuna asked. Something like that. What kind of friend lets a diabetic man wander Atlanta with no food in him? Andre Voss opened his mouth, then closed it. You're right, he said simply. She hadn't expected the honesty. It disarmed her more than an excuse would have. Later, once she'd gone, Andre stood beside the hospital bed and looked down at Elias without any softness left in his voice. You need to tell her. Today was the second time she saved your life without knowing whose life it was. That's not testing her kindness anymore, Elias. That's using it. The call came through the legal aid office 2 days later. A man's voice, low, refusing to give his name. I drove forklift for Renwick Roots, he said. Loaded pallets myself. I saw the video. You didn't lie about the counts. Can you come in? Yuna asked, gripping the receiver. No. I've got a new job. A family. These people know how to close doors on a man. Yolanda signaled for her to keep him talking. Do you have records? A long pause. 19 invoices. 47 dispatch sheets. Messages changing delivery locations after the trucks already left the depot. Her heart pounded. Where are they? Safe. My sister, courage is easy when somebody else pays the price for it. I've already paid, Yuna said quietly. He gave her a place and a time. No name. No promise. They met at a mechanic's yard near the airport 2 evenings later, engines loud enough to cover a quiet conversation, a radio playing somewhere behind a stack of tires. Curtis Boone kept his cap pulled low and his eyes on the gate the whole time. You understand, Yolanda said, these documents may need testimony eventually. Not today. But eventually. That's what scares me. Fear doesn't make the information useless. He set a black bag on the hood of a car. Inside, freight invoices, dispatch forms, screenshots of internal messages rerouting trucks after they'd already left the warehouse. Route 4 to Ashwood cancelled. Redirect 300 units to Crown Annex storage. Do not update beneficiary sheet until Monday. Yuna's hands went cold reading it. This is the same week I flagged the shortage. We loaded 700 units, Curtis said. 491 reached Ashwood. The rest went to a commercial storage bay under a shell name. Whose name? Above my pay grade. I just drove the truck. Yolanda flipped to the final page, a property transfer record stapled behind the invoices, a company name neither of them recognized yet, tied to 3 recently shuttered Ashwood storefronts. This isn't just about missing groceries, she said slowly. Curtis pulled his cap lower. I told you. I only drove the truck. He looked at Yuna one last time before walking back toward the gate. Whatever this really is, it's bigger than food. Somebody wanted that land more than they ever wanted to feed anybody. Yolanda spread the property records across her small desk 2 days later, county filings printed and highlighted in 3 colors. Meridian Sparrow Holdings, she said, tapping the name at the top of each transfer. Registered 8 months ago. Bought the old laundromat on 5th, the shuttered pharmacy on Cascade, and 2 row houses on the corner where your table used to sit before you moved it. Yuna leaned closer. Who's behind it? Buried under 2 more shell layers. But the registered agent's address matches a law firm that also handles Renwick Family Foods corporate filings. Something cold settled in Yuna's stomach. Vanessa. I can't prove that yet. But I can prove the timing. Yolanda pulled a final page from the stack, a public notice from the city planning office. Ashwood's up for a rezoning vote. Mixed-use redevelopment, higher property ceilings, the kind that triples land value overnight for whoever already owns the parcels when it passes. When's the vote? 9 days. Yuna sat back slowly, the pieces rearranging themselves into something worse than she'd imagined. The food wasn't the point. It was never the point. The food paid for it, Yolanda said. Diverted inventory, resold quietly, routed through the same accounts funding these purchases. The charity wasn't being looted for its own sake. It was funding a land grab in the same neighborhood it claims to feed. Yuna thought of the grandmother on the overturned bucket. Of Curtis's shaking hands in the mechanic's yard. Of the For Lease Sign she'd walked past a dozen times without really seeing it, taped crooked in the window of a pharmacy that used to fill her neighbor's prescriptions. They're not just stealing groceries, she said. They're buying the block out from under the same people they photographed for the brochure. Yolanda closed the folder. 9 days isn't much time to build a case that can survive a room full of lawyers. Then we don't sleep much for 9 days. For the first time since the envelope had fallen out of her bag, Yuna didn't feel like a woman defending herself against an accusation. She felt like someone with 9 days to save an entire block of people who didn't yet know they were about to lose their homes. Elias came to the table 2 days later, beard trimmed, the limp gone. Clean now in a way that made the disguise look, for the first time, like exactly what it was. You disappeared, Yuna said, not looking up from the bread count. I had things to settle. Have you started eating properly? Yes. Good. She went back to her clipboard. He stayed standing there anyway. I owe you an explanation, he said. Her hand stopped mid-tally. Then explain. He looked at the traders nearby, at Andre's car parked across the street, at everything he still wasn't sure how to say plainly. I can't tell you everything today. Yuna laughed once, without any humor in it. Then you didn't come to explain. You came to announce that an explanation exists. That's fair. It's not fair. It's a warehouse trick, tell someone just enough to keep them calm. She set the clipboard down. Are you connected to Renwick? He held her gaze. Yes. How? I can't say yet. She stepped back like he'd touched her. You used me. I let you believe I had nowhere to sleep. I didn't know it was your last $20 until after. You knew enough to ask. The words landed cleanly, no defense available. He looked down at his own hands, soft, uncalloused, the exact detail she'd clocked the first day and dismissed as none of her business. I'm sorry, he said. Sorry is what powerful people say when they want the person they hurt to make it easy for them. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. There's a rezoning vote in 7 days. My lawyer thinks your company's charity funded a land grab in this exact neighborhood. Did you know that too, while you were eating my beans and asking me questions? No. I only just learned it myself. I'm putting my name on the public comment list for that hearing. Not yours. Not your company's. Mine. I'm signing up too, he said. As myself. No entrance, no announcement. Just a name on a sheet, same as anyone. That's not an apology. I know. Una picked the clipboard back up, done with him. Then take your secret protection and go, before you make my lying even longer than it already is. The council chamber had folding chairs, fluorescent lights, and a sign-up sheet clipped to a board by the door, nothing built for spectacle, which was exactly why it worked. Una sat between Yolanda and a row of Ashwood neighbors, her name 11th on the public comment list. Vanessa's attorney approached the clerk's table before the session opened, speaking low, gesturing at a printed page. Objection to the order of the list, he said, loud enough now for the room to hear. Ms. Zhang is a named party in an active investigation. Her comment risks prejudicing. She's a resident of the affected zoning district, the clerk said flatly, same as everyone else on this sheet. Sit down, counselor. One by one, neighbors rose and spoke their 3 minutes, a barber losing his shop, a woman who'd lived on Cascade for 30 years, a teenager reading a statement his grandmother had written because her hands shook too much to hold the paper herself. The council chamber, small and plain, held more weight than any ballroom Una had ever imagined. Elias's name came up 14th. He stood, unremarkable in a plain gray suit, no entourage, no introduction beyond his own name into the microphone. I'm not here to make a speech about myself, he said. I'm submitting evidence into the public record, an internal audit and recovered security footage relevant to Meridian Sparrow Holdings land acquisitions in this district. A council member leaned into her microphone. And your connection to that company, sir? I chair Renwick Family Foods. The charity funding this district's food program has been financing those acquisitions without my knowledge, through diverted inventory and falsified distribution records. The room went very still. Trent Bishop, seated near the back at Vanessa's request, was called forward minutes later after his name surfaced in the footage. Under a council member's direct, patient questioning, his composure lasted less than 90 seconds. I followed instructions, he said. The camera removal, the delivery to her building, all of it came from Ms. Kerrigan's office. Vanessa's face didn't move. Her hands, gripping the seat in front of her, did. The council chair called a recess to review the submitted evidence. When the session resumed, the vote was postponed pending investigation, not denied, not decided, simply paused long enough for the truth to catch up to the paperwork. Una's turn came last. She stood, steadied her voice, and did not mention Elias, the envelope, or the watch at all. I'm not here about what happened to me, she said. I'm here because my neighbors deserve to keep their homes, and because a charity with someone's name on the building isn't the same thing as a promise kept to the people it claims to serve. She sat back down before the 2-minute bell even rang. The investigation moved slowly, the way real investigations do, through subpoenaed records, not dramatic confessions. Vanessa Kerrigan was terminated within the month and referred for prosecution on fraud and embezzlement. Her lawyers called the diversions operational adjustments, but the property records told a different story to a grand jury. Trent Bishop's cooperation agreement spared him a harsher charge in exchange for full testimony. Meridian Sparrow Holdings' pending acquisitions were frozen, then unwound entirely once the council's investigation confirmed how they'd been funded. Una didn't attend most of the hearings. Yolanda made sure of that. Instead, she spent that season doing something steadier, working with a neighborhood land trust Yolanda helped her structure, deliberately, so no single company, not even Renwick Family Foods, could ever buy the block outright again. The community table got a real roof, a small refrigerated unit donated through the trust rather than any one company's name, and a rule Una wrote herself into its bylaws: no photographs of anyone receiving food, ever, for any reason. Renwick Family Foods rebuilt its charity program too, slower and quieter than before: public ledgers, independent oversight, a warehouse door that stayed the same for everyone regardless of who was watching. Una was offered a paid oversight role. She had Yolanda review every clause twice before she signed anything. Elias found her at the table on a Thursday afternoon, in his own clothes this time, no disguise left to wear. "You're late," she said, not looking up. "Traffic. This is Atlanta. Leave earlier." He set a small wooden box on the corner of the table. Inside sat a single $20 bill. "What's this?" she asked. "What I owe you." "I didn't lend it to you." "I know. I'm not calling it payment. I'm just returning what I let you spend while I had every means to protect myself and didn't tell you." She closed the box without picking it up. "I'm putting it in the transport fund. Not because I forgive you. Because it's useful there." "That's fair." Near the entrance to the new distribution center a week later, a man in torn clothes stood uncertainly by the door, no paperwork, no registration slip. A young volunteer moved to turn him away. "Wait outside, sir, we've got—" Una crossed the room before he finished the sentence. "Is he hungry?" she asked. "I don't know. I didn't ask." "Then ask that first." She pulled out a chair. "Sit. Questions can wait. Hunger doesn't." Nobody lifted a phone. Nobody checked his bag. Nobody wondered, even for a second, whether he might secretly be someone important. That, more than any hearing or headline, was the only proof that actually mattered. If this story reminded you that dignity was never something you had to earn by being important, like, share, and subscribe, because the next story is already waiting, and you won't see this one coming either.